What is good, YouTube? It is now episode 6 of Catch and Counter. So I think y'all kind of know the drill by now. In case we got anybody new or anybody watching on replay that hasn't checked out the show, this is Catch and Counter with Jack and Nibs, a part of ITR Boxing. I am Jack. Got my co-host Nibs with me. So Nibs, what's going on, bro? We got another week of boxing. Well, it hasn't been as much boxing recently, but we still got a lot to talk about. So how you doing,
Bro? Before we get going, I got to call out the owner of ITR, bro. Felix, where you at? Come get this bottle. Take them shots. You still owe me. Yeah, bum.
It's been a
All right,
while.
bro.
Yes. Yeah, no, you got every right to do that. It's been a few weeks. He's been slacking. Maybe that's why the boxing shop's been taking their hiatus. So it's been a little bit.
Pay me what you owe me.
Mm-hmm.
You lose the bet to me. I need my reparations.
Yeah. You guys heard it here. Any of you guys and the viewers go spam Felix. Let him know about that. We'll let him know for sure too. But I want to say shout out to Jesus. I'm saying saludos Jesus in the chat. He's saying Frank Martin getting ready to retire after he loses to Shakur. That's a fight we will definitely break down for sure in a little bit. I'm not so sure about Frank Martin needing to retire after that fight. I think that we'll get into it in a little bit, but I think that's the kind of fight that even if I'm going to pick Shakur in that fight, but I think that Frank Martin will learn a lot from that fight, win, lose, or draw, no matter what happens. So, Clay, what do you think on that real quick?
Mm-hmm. Ain't look, you lose to Shakur. It's like losing to Floyd. It's like losing, to one of the greats, bro. You don't quit after that. You learn from it and keep it moving, bro. Yeah, I mean, I get what he's saying. It'll if it goes the way we think it'll go, which means it'll go bad. People are going to think, oh, well, Frank Martin should retire. A lot of people think Spence should retire after the ass whooping he got from Bud. Spence has still got a lot of money he can make in the business. Frank Martin will be fine. He'll learn from it to go on. Probably just end up being a world champion. Felix, with my damn shots. Yes.
He says he's got you. We'll see if that's next week or not. But you've been saying he's been saying he's got you for a while. Though, so I don't know.
You was there when he said it. He said by the end of the month, coming on, bro. We in September.
Yeah, we got to put some pressure on him to get that done on Monday. So the first thing we'll cover today is it was a rematch of a fight last week. Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith. It was a fight that I think we had both picked Eubank to win the first fight. It seemed like he was kind of cruising in the first fight, and then he was caught. He was knocked out by Liam Smith, which was kind of shocking at the time. It was a slight upset, but they got to run it back, and Eubank was able to avenge his loss, and he did it in a very, very impressive way. He didn't lose to me around he didn't even lose, I don't think, 10 straight seconds of that fight. I thought that the game plan they implemented with Bomac of him kind of doing the jab and hold strategy and then mixing up the combinations on the outside with the uppercuts too as Smith is coming in was perfect. So I just think he did a great job. And I think that the middleweight division has been looking for these guys. And Chris Eubank's never going to be on a pound for pound list, but I think he is a notable guy who the middleweight division, there's big fights in him for the middleweight division. So what do you think about what Eubank did against Liam Smith last week?
I think Eubank righted or wrong, right? I think he was on his way to doing exactly what he was supposed to have done in the first fight and getting before he got caught, right? I think he got caught being cocky, and then being really not as prepared for what could come back at him. Credit to Bomac for getting him ready and his team. That was probably one of the most one-sided rematches where the guy who won got knocked out before, bro. So, it just lets you know that, this is boxing. This is the sport that we love, right? This is why, guys get to fight the fights. Like, you know what I mean? A lot of people probably would have said, oh, well, Chris Eubank is overrated or he's done because he lost to Liam Smith the way he did. He got knocked out. They run it back and look what happens. You feel me? This is why you watch these fights, bro. This guy got it, and he, you got to respect the dude who says, okay, I took an L. Let's run it right back because I guarantee you I'm whooping your ass the next time. And he did just that. We talked about it, in the pre-show. I don't need to see a third fight because I thought he was going to win the first one, before he got caught. But, financially, them running it back probably makes the most sense unless that Conor Ben fight can be made. So, they'll probably do a trilogy just because, again, maybe not immediately, but, down the way, it makes sense, for money. But I think really now the question is okay, what does Smith do from here? Because, he got thoroughly dominated in every aspect of the fight. There was, like you said, I you have to analyze that fight to be able to give him a time frame in which he was winning any portion of it. You know what I'm saying? If you want to be nice. So I think the question is well, shit, what does he do from here? I think that the sky's the limit for Eubank. I think he can do, because everything you pointed to before, the division is weak right now. You know what I mean? He can take advantage of that. He might be able to get a title fight, if not the next fight, the one after that. He's got options. He can run it back with Smith. He can look to make that Conor Ben money, which is going to be huge. So he's got options. I think that the question we all got to be asking is, should Smith be retiring legitimately, right? No shame in it. Or, does he try to hang around and double up on his money?
Yeah, I mean, Liam Smith's had a really good career. All the Smith brothers seem like guys who they all sort of overachieve. They're all kind of guys who don't have all the physical gifts that some other guys are blessed with, but they're grinders and they always get the most out of their ability. So Liam Smith's the kind of guy. He was a world champion. He's fought Canelo. He's fought Jaime Munguia. He now has a Eubank fight. He's made a lot of money. If he wants to come back, whether it's another Eubank fight or fight some other UK guys, I think he could definitely do that. If he wants to call it quits right now, I think there's no shame in that. He could help train Callum and do kind of things like that because his brother's still fighting. So I think any of those would be cool. I think for Eubank, like you said, whether it's maybe does he fight at Janabek or something like that later on, there's other fights out there. But the fight that we'll talk about quickly, you mentioned it too, was the Eubank fight against Conor Ben. Clearly, that was a fight that was talked about last year. Ben had popped dirty for the fight in October, so the fight hasn't happened. So the fight didn't happen. Ben has never been officially suspended. He's been kind of hiding out for a whole year now. So it seems like the fight could happen somewhere, maybe not in the UK, but in the Saudi Arabia or the US, which is interesting, though, because for that kind of fight, unless you get big Saudi money, it seems like all the money would be in the UK for that with the Ben and the Eubank names, because they are still a big draw. I see Jesus here. Jesus got no love for Chris Eubank, even after his best performance of his career. That's all good. I mean, I think a lot of people in the States really don't care as much about him, too. So that's why it's interesting to see where that fight ends up. But do you think that fight is a realistic option? Do you think that fight could happen? Do you care about that fight happening? What are your thoughts on that?
So one thing to address that real quickly, right? I think you're right. Most people don't give a shit about UK fighters until they fight one of our stars, right? Or they become, unified champs or some shit like that, right? Nobody give a shit about Anthony Joshua until he got all the straps. You know what I mean? Most people think he's a bum now that he doesn't have them. Present company included. But you you can't say that Eubank is trash, or there's nobody's worried about him, because let's face it, if you look at the 160-pound division, the middleweight division as it stands right now, there's an argument to be made to say he's one of the best, if not the best dude in the division. Like he's a guy that could come in and fuck around and win some belts. You know what I mean? And be the dude if things continue to go upward, with him and Bomac. I mean, we got to see how that situation for Bomac plays out, but fuck around, we could be talking about Chris Eubank being the king of the 160s, in the next couple of years. With him and Conor Ben, bro, I grew up watching Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank, you know what I mean, and their fights. So it'd be kind of cool. You know what I mean? For me, just as an older head, to be able to see the two of them actually come together and fight. I don't think Conor Ben should get that fight next. I think he should have to, get an in-between fight before he signs on and gets that money. That's just me, because he popped dirty. But I think it would be a great fight, and I think Eubank kicks his ass. From what I've seen of Conor Ben, he's kind of just one-dimensional, bro. And we've seen now that Eubank, he's got dimensions, and if he can keep that momentum going, I think it'd be easy work.
Never mind the size, too, where Eubank is a middleweight who's fought at 160, and Conor Ben is still a 147-pounder, a welterweight. So that is, I think I agree with you. We're not sure if Conor Ben deserves a fight, but boxing a lot of times really doesn't care who deserves what. It just comes down to who makes the most money, and that fight is a money fight, so it probably will happen. I will say, if I'm Eubank, though, I'm not going to sacrifice nothing this time around. I know he was going to go down to like 157 before. If I'm Eubank, I say, listen, you first of all, you drained me down and you cheated last time. If you want to fight me, you meet me at 160 and we'll make it happen. So I think Ben has already said that he will take it at 160. But if I'm Eubank, especially this time around, being definitely the A side, I'm not going to sacrifice anything for sure.
And if you're Ben, that's dangerous, right? Going up to 160 in your first fight, being at with a guy who's already at a championship level, right? Let's get it real. Chris Eubank doesn't have a strap yet, but he's a championship level fighter in the division, right? And then that's going to be your first fight, unless if you're Conor Ben, unless you think you're the best thing since sliced bread, which he is not. You know what I mean? You're not Bud, right? You're not going to come in and just first fight in the division and beat a guy at that level. If he's going to fight at 160, I want to see him have another fight against maybe one of these lower tier guys at 160. Get some good competition and see how he does there, because he struggled to beat some guys at 147. That I thought he should have handled easily. So you're not even. Nobody's even talking about you at 147, which is your division. You know what I mean? So we'll see how that goes. Plus, I think isn't Eubank like 6 foot? Connor's like 5'7", something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Eubank will definitely have the height advantage for sure, too, reach advantage too. And that was someone Conor Bennett started to grow on me a little bit. I know, like I said, he had some tough fights along the way early on. He fought like a 500 level journeyman, and he was in a war with him. Ended up rematching him, getting the win, but then he started to really kind of turn, and I thought he was looking like a legit contender. The Algieri fight, even just some of the head movement, little things he started doing, the power was clearly there. But now you got to start to question the power after everything that happened last year. So I don't even know what to think of Conor Bennett at this point. I thought he was a really good guy who was really starting to build some steam, but that steam, obviously, who knows what to even make of it now after everything that pops. So we shall see. But we got a few more people in the chat. So we got TJ right here. So what salute to TJ as always. He was with us last week, but will be with us again at some point very soon. A very good boxing brain right there. We got Felix saying that he's on the wrong side of the screen. And I know you guys aren't a fan of Anthony Joshua, but let's settle down on my boy AJ right here. I still care about him. I mean, I'm picking Deontay Wilder to sleep him, but I still want to give my boy AJ some respect. So at the end of the day, he was still real close to beating Usyk in that second fight. So I still want to. Is he what we ever thought he was going to be? Is he Lennox Lewis? No, but let's kind of chill out on my boy AJ. No more AJ slander allowed for the rest of the time. So
let's say what it is, bro. He probably beats everybody else that isn't a top 5 guy in the division, bro. You know what I mean? Like if you were to fight Joe Joyce tomorrow, I would bet the house on Anthony Joshua. To be honest with you,
I would too.
Especially after I saw what happened, with Big Bang. So, but he could get in with a guy like Big Bang and get slept. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know, bro. I think Anthony Joshua's best days are behind him. I do think he's still going to be a draw to make a shitload of money just because he's Anthony Joshua. You know what I mean? He's held all the straps.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we got another good comment here. This is a good friend of mine, Nick Pittman, who he's a boxing fan. He's been into boxing longer than I have. We've trained at gyms together. So anytime if I know someone, they're going to come with their stuff too. He said, I want Eubank Ben, but this time I'll be rooting for Eubank. Ben, even though he popped dirty, still brings a name. So I think that's all facts only right there. I think that I was rooting for Ben the first time around too, but I think it's hard to root for him this time now. And I hope and expect Eubank to handle business if it does happen. Then Felix said right there, AJ did go to war with one of the greats in Vladimir Klitschko. That was an all-time heavyweight fight. I know Klitschko was older, he was retired, but I think AJ he gets overrated by some, he gets underrated by some. But if he was a complete hype job when he got dropped by Klitschko, I don't think he ever gets up. So he was able to get up and get the knockout. So it's an older Klitschko, but I still think that put some respect on my boy AJ's name at the end of the day. That's all I gotta say. Not too much, but a little bit.
It's just one of those things where pure boxers, like fighters who are pure boxers, are always going to give AJ problems, right? He's going to have problems. You see, with Usyk, he did miles better the second time around than he did the first one, right? We can all agree there. But you look at Ruiz, and I tell people this all the time, and I'm going to die on this hill. If Ruiz doesn't get happy and start getting not training correctly and spending all this money and this, that, and the third, if he goes hard in the paint for that second fight, he beats Joshua again, in my opinion. So I think that was a wasted opportunity for him. But as far as Joshua's concerned, bro, I don't know why are we talking about Anthony
Yeah, I
Joshua,
don't know.
but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah,
We'll wrap
look,
this up after, but make your last little point on
I,
AJ.
I,
Real
I
quick.
think Anthony Joshua is going to go down in history as one of the guys. You know what I mean? He's not going to be the best. I don't I don't know if you want to put him in the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? I would he wouldn't get my vote, but he's going to be one of the guys, right? During this era that was one of the best in the division. And that's something to say. Not everybody's going to be able to say that, bro.
Yeah, no,
He's still
100%.
trash.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Let's calm down a little bit right there. But we'll move on to something a little more on topic. So we touched on the Bomac thing real quick, but he was arrested over the weekend for on a gun related charge at an airport. So still a lot of unknowns in this. I will give my 2 cents really quick on this. Just I think it's kind of a conspiracy thing, but we live in a world of conspiracies, especially in the boxing world. So I know that Bomac and Terence Crawford were related to Daniel Kinahan once upon a time. He was going to be an advisor for them to look into the Spence Crawford fight, maybe with Saudi money or something along those lines. That same Daniel Kinahan, who we know has done a lot of bad things, he's on no-fly lists, he's on all wanted by all these organizations, is also related to Liam's, not blood related, but he's done business with the Smith brothers, like he has Tyson Fury, like he has a lot of those guys in the UK. So I'm thinking is Bomac, if he clearly got into the country with it, and there was an issue with it leaving the country. Is it crazy to say? It is crazy to say. I probably shouldn't even say this, but I will anyway. So who cares? But is there a small chance that Kinahan was saying, "Listen, you guys cut me out at the last second of this Spence Bud fight. I didn't get a percentage out of that, and now you're gonna beat my boy Liam Smith." Hold on a second. I got a little something for you. So, am I going too far on that? What are your thoughts on just the whole Bomac situation? Also, because I think
Nah, I
no, it's
think
been
that's
crazy
exactly
thing.
what happened. I think that's exactly what happened. But let's play devil's advocate here, right? Let's say the gun wasn't purely metal, which a lot of guns aren't nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they get picked up the first time, but then it leads you to say, okay, well, how did they find it the second time, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
did somebody tell them about it? Was somebody maybe a little bit more diligent in their check of the bags? Maybe Bomac wasn't as good as hiding it the first time. Who knows, right? So there's a number of things that can happen there. Just to clarify for everybody who maybe hasn't been following it as closely, Bomac is still in the UK. He's going to be there at least until October the 9th when his next court case is. Gun laws are very strict over in UK, so he could, at the very least get 5 years if he's found guilty, with these gun charges. So this is serious. This isn't, a situation where, oh, well, he'll get a slap on the wrist and come back home, because it's not in the US. Like, the gun laws abroad are way different. As we found out with the Brittany Griner situation, laws are different in different countries for things we might think you should get a slap on the wrist for. So, just saying that to get it out there. But yeah, bro, I mean, it's suspicious as fuck. Like, it almost leads you to say, okay, well, maybe if they were still riding with this dude, would that gun have been found? You know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of what ifs. You dig? And I feel like if they didn't catch it coming in, you know what I mean? Were they just waiting for him to leave? Or maybe they caught it, but like, hey, we'll let the fight go on, kind of shit. Before we say something. I
Yeah.
don't know.
We'll wait to see if Liam Smith wins the fight first. That might have been what they were thinking. Who
Right,
knows? But
right. And
yeah,
I don't know, man. And I want to say that it was an honest mistake, maybe coming in. And who knows? Maybe he does have the right paperwork. He just didn't file it on time. Maybe he didn't have it with him. Who knows? Maybe he'll actually be able to provide some type of proof as to why he should be able to carry it with him. You alluded to in the pre-show. He got robbed last time he was over there, so he's probably got good cause to have one. But that's another thing, guys. If you're going to travel abroad, make sure you get all your paperwork. Make sure you know all the laws about shit if you're gonna try to take some shit with you, because you can end up in a situation like this.
no, exactly. It's horrible timing for Bomac too, because he should be doing a victory lap right now. He was the head coach in one of the best performances we've seen at least in the modern era, probably one of the best performances even in the history of the sport when with Terence Crawford, what he did to Errol Spence, and then might even be just as impressive what he did with Eubank, because we all know what a special fighter Spence is. I mean, that Bud is. But the Eubank fight, he was coming off of the knockout, but for him to come back and win the fight the way he did, I thought was unbelievable. So it sucks that Bomac should be getting his flowers and all those things right now. So I just hope to God that they're able to kind of sort this thing out, and he's not going to have to do too much time so we can get back over here, because Keyshawn Davis is going to be fighting, and all these guys are going to need big fights coming up. But what's up?
What I want to point out real quick, and I wasn't trying to cut you off, is
now you're good.
You look at how much sharper Eubank's punches were, bro. He was surgical with his shit this time around, as opposed to before. He was picking your boy off. You know what I'm saying? So you're right. Yeah, he should be taking a victory lap. But here's what we got to think about, right? If the worst case scenario, knock on wood, this doesn't happen, 5 years. Let's say he gets that 5 years, bro. That's 5 years when you're at the top of the mountain. You know what I mean? That you can't get back. You got Bud, who's probably got 5 years left. You know what
probably
I'm saying?
Not even, honestly. He's probably only got a few. He could fight way longer than that, but I think with what he wants, it's probably just a few more big fights at this point. More to your point.
I would say within the next 5 years, he's got the biggest window to make the most money in his career, right? Within these next 5 years. You know what I'm saying? If, like you said, if that. Chris Eubank is not a young fighter. You know what I'm saying? So he's within that 5-year window where he's got to make the most out of what he's able to accomplish right now. All the guys he has right now that are hot, they're within that window. So if he gets popped and he's got to serve that 5 years, bro, that's going to be devastating. And then you got to think about not only what's next for him, but what's next for the guys he's training. You know what I mean? Bud probably doesn't need him as much at the point that he's in his career right now. But a guy like Eubank, who's, just getting started on, with that tutelage, where does that leave him? And that changes a Conor Ben fight if he doesn't have, Bomac.
Yeah, because I know that Bomac does have a great team around him. He's got Coach Red Spice. He's got a few other guys that Bomac has always had with him. So I think they could, they don't want to do without him, but I think in the worst case scenario, they could get by for a little bit. But I just hope that for Bomac and for everyone's case, that he's able to come back to the States safely sooner rather than later, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you never want, somebody from here to not come back home. So, obviously, I do hope that everything does get taken care of legally, so that, your boy can come back and keep training guys out there in Nebraska, because he wasn't the greatest fighter, himself. So, he in prison, that's not a good look for him.
Well, at least I'm sure in prison, he's got enough to, maybe he wasn't a top-level boxer, but hopefully he should be able to kind of protect himself in there. But we got a few comments in there. We got Adam Hurley in the comments saying David Benavidez versus Demetrius Andrade is going to be lit. You guys know me. I'm a New England guy, so I've been rooting for my guy Boo Boo to get a big fight. Not officially finalized, but it looks like it will be, and that is a fight that we cannot wait to break down once it comes up for sure. Adam Hurley mentioned also, did Billy win tonight? So Billy fights on ESPN Plus. Christian Billy, if you guys don't know who he is, he's a guy who I'm really high on. He's at 168 right now. He's going to be fighting in a little bit on ESPN Plus, is what Jesus Ramos said right here. Or we'll definitely be watching it. I think that will be after this show. So we're gonna be on for a little bit longer, but once we wrap it up, that will be on ESPN Plus. If I see any other updates, I'll let you guys know. Then Adam Hurley also said that Crawford says if he fought Canelo, that would be a great fight. And that's actually something we're going to touch on a little bit. We're going to touch on our guy Manny Pacquiao real first, but then we will move into that Canelo Bud talk. So it seems like that's something that a lot of people want to hear from. So to switch on over to a legend of the sport, Manny Pacquiao, the only 8-division world champion in the history of the sport. He's been in the news cycle recently to make a comeback, not as a pro, but as an amateur. There's been talks that he might look to try to get into the 2024 Olympic Games. I got a few things. First of all, if he wants to do it, all well and good, all the power to him. I don't want to see it be a thing. Like, I think he has to, one, he definitely has to earn his spot to qualify. There should be no, like, he's grandfathered into the tournament. And it's also like you're going to take now a spot from somebody else who's worked their whole life for it. And I'm not even sure, one, if he would, never mind get a medal, I'm not even sure if he would qualify. He's just been out. It's been at least 30 years since he's fought as an amateur because he turned pro early. And he's 46 years old. Just there's a lot of wear and tear on those tires. We saw in the Ugas fight, he kind of just got picked apart the whole time. So What do you think about this whole Pacquiao thing? Do you like the idea? Are you with me? I think a lot of people see it as kind of unfair, but if anything, I mean, unfair if he gets a free pass to get in. I don't see it as being unfair, like he'll win the whole thing. I'm not even sure if he'd qualify. But what are your thoughts on this whole kind of idea? Because we never really seen something like this before.
No, I mean the Olympics is the Olympics. So I'll say this: it's the best athletes in the world competing against each other, right? There shouldn't be an age limit, right? There's no age limit in sprinting. There's no age limit. I think in gymnastics or swimming. Michael Phelps been doing this shit for how many ever years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why should there be an age limit in boxing, bro? You know what I'm saying? If you're the best and you want to be able to compete, fuck it, go compete. You know what I mean? I think that for me, and I'm kind of the old school. This is where I get caught up is once you turn pro, I think that should be it though.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like once you're a pro and you are a world champion 8 times over, bro, you have nothing to prove. You know what I'm saying by going to the Olympics. But again, I'm never going to be one to tell another man what he should or shouldn't do. If he wants to go, great. Is he going to qualify? Here's the thing you have to think about. Yeah, he's an all-time great in professional boxing. Amateur, Olympic boxing, points and all that, it's a different game, bro. As great as he is, like you said, he turned pro, 15, 16 years old. He never went to try to do the Olympics first. That Olympic style point system and how they fight is a whole different thing. You can ask Andre Ward. There's a big difference between what you're expected to do in the Olympics to what you're expected to do as a pro. You look at a lot of the guys that we have that are some of our best young up and coming pros didn't win, gold or bronze or any of that shit in the Olympics, right? Deontay Wilder, he got a bronze in the heavyweight division, later on, and look what he's become. But you have to understand there's a difference between that. But I'm old school, bro. I think once you become a pro, especially a world champion in the pro division, I don't want to see you fighting in the Olympics. That's just
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that the last Olympics was kind of that exception where I was cool with Keyshawn Davis and some of those guys that had a few fights because they were originally going to be in the Olympics. And then once the Olympics were going to be canceled, they turned pro, but then they ended up having the Olympics a year later. So I think special circumstances you can always work around, but I agree. I think that once you turn pro, especially once you get to a certain level, I think you should just stay there. But it will be interesting, and I'll be interested to see if he does compete, how well he does in it. It'll be one of those things that there will be a ton of eyeballs on him for sure. He's talked about just how it would be good for the Filipino people. And what I wonder is, it'll be great for his country, but you're now then going to take a qualifying spot away from somebody else. So would he be better off maybe just being a coach or something like that? Like maybe this isn't the right. I see his thought process behind it, but maybe there's other ways to kind of support his people too. I'm not sure.
all of the above, right? Here's the thing, right? If the dude's got an Olympic dream, who am I to shit on it? I'm just a fan, right? But I'll say this: everything you're saying is correct. There's some other young Filipino dude who's got a dream to be Manny Pacquiao someday, and maybe his route to that isn't turning pro at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. It's, hey, let me go to the Olympics, you know what I'm saying, and win a medal for my country. You're taking a spot from a kid who's got that dream to be you someday. You've already accomplished everything there is to accomplish in boxing, bro, outside of being an Olympic champion. And I get it, selfishly, you want to go back and get that for yourself. But why? Like, here's the thing. Nobody's going to give a shit except him. You know what I mean? It's just going to be for him. I'm not going to hold him in any greater or lesser light if, and then here's the thing. Well, let's say you go to the Olympics and you get your ass whipped. Then what? There's always that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't think he needs it. I'm with you. I don't want to see it either. I think if it were a guy like, Berlanga or, somebody who had something to gain from that, then I could see it. But what does Pacquiao gain from winning in the Olympics?
Yeah, like you said, I think it's just kind of a personal goal. But like you said, he's already an all-time great. He's not going to enhance his greatness. It would be, I mean, put it this way. it would be pretty damn cool. So maybe it would a little bit, just because I would be shocked if he ever turned around and won a gold medal. I just think it's been too long. Those guys are young and they've been working and training in that certain style for years. So I think it's going to be hard for him to overcome. So I would be interested to see if he does compete, but I think it's more likely to see, like you said, how does it turn out? And this doesn't affect his legacy at all either. But if he turns and he loses bad in one of the qualifying matchups, you'd see people poking, making fun of him. Not that he even cares about that either, but I think we're a lot more likely to see him lose early than we are to see him go deep in it.
Yeah, I mean it. Again, I get why he wants to do it. I think there are more cons than pros for him going into this. But again, he's probably gonna. Hey, look, he's probably not going to give a shit what any of us think either way. But just in my opinion, I think that cut it out, bro. Like you said, maybe be a coach somebody else that's coming up, give somebody else another opportunity, because you're at this point in your career again where you've accomplished everything. You have zero to prove, bro. You know what I mean? If you never walk into another boxing gym for the rest of your life, you're going down as one of the greatest fighters of all time, if not the greatest fighter to come out of the Philippines. What else do you need to prove to anybody else?
Yeah, he's
Including
accomplished.
himself at this point, including himself. And I'm pretty sure his wife doesn't want to do that shit. Come on, bro, cut it out.
No, because like I said, he's accomplished everything 5 times, everything 10 times over. Like he's won more titles than anybody across weight classes in the history of the sport. So we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting to see if he does turn pro. Obviously, they're starting the qualifiers, I think, real soon. So he's going to have to find out real soon about it. But I just hope if he does it, that he goes about it the right way, which I'm sure he would. He wouldn't take a free pass or just get into it. I think he'd have to earn his way into it. And we'll see if he even does that. But big talk now is we got Canelo's fighting Jermell Charlo, but there's been another name that's been linked to Canelo. Adam Hurley mentioned in the chat, and that's one Terence Bud Crawford. And that's Nibs' guy. Nibs was the one who picked him to beat Spence. But even I've always been a believer of Crawford, and even though I picked Spence to win, I thought that they were 2 of the top 3 or 4 fighters in the world. And Bud is clearly right now, as good as Inoue is, Bud is clearly the best fighter in the world. Cemented to me himself as probably the best fighter of this whole post-Floyd era. All those things. So Canelo's made some statements. One of the ones he made was the resume comment about Crawford, saying that Crawford's good, but he's only beaten one great fighter in Errol Spence. So what do you think about those comments? Is that also Canelo now starting to, because at first he wasn't interested in answering questions about Bud because he had the Jermell fight coming up. So what do you think just on those comments he's made on Crawford's resume, and also just the fact that, do you think he's starting to also entertain this as a fight? Because it clearly would be a huge money fight.
Yeah, but if I'm Bud, I'm saying that shit right back to Canelo. You've beaten what, maybe 3 great fighters in your career. You beat a whole bunch of good fighters. Don't get me wrong. He's got a much better resume. I mean, he's got a much better resume than pretty much anybody who's actively fighting. You feel me? Even his losses are more impressive than most people's wins. So, yeah, I'll give you that. But let's face it. Most people think you lost to Triple G. You know what I'm saying? Most people think you didn't win a second of a round against Floyd and that loss. Most people think you got completely embarrassed against Bivol. None of those things can you say about Bud Crawford, bro. He's never been embarrassed in a fight. All of his wins, he clearly won, right? Even his tough fights, he clearly won them. And yes, he's fought one great fighter, but how did he beat him? He whooped his ass from the beginning to the end. And if it hadn't have got stopped, he'd have probably got a really nasty knockout, and Errol Spence will probably be in somebody's hospital right now. We can't say that about the results of your great wins, right? You barely beat these dudes. So, yeah, are you the biggest money draw? Correct. Are you the best of the 2 fighters, pound for pound? No. I mean, Bud's number 1 for a reason. I think I got Canelo as my 4th pound for pound, just on the strength and respect of what he's done in the past, not of what he's doing right now. It's what he's done in the past. So, but I will say this: Bud's 147. I could see him going up to 154. I always thought he'd end up at 154 someday, but that's a different beast talking about fighting at 168 against one of the best fighters, in our current division. No matter how old he is and how much tread he has on his tires, fighting at one, it's just like the argument we make against Charlo and Canelo, right? Canelo's been fighting at 168. He's been fighting, super middleweights and light heavyweights who probably walk around at heavyweight weights. You know what I'm saying? For most of his career. Charlo has not. He's been 154 his whole career. Bud, you just started fighting at 140.
Yeah, Terence started as a lightweight at 135, which a lot of people don't realize now too. He fought Gamboa once upon a time.
And what Canelo started at welterweight, right?
But he was like, that was when he was like 15 years old. He came on the world scene at 154 and then 160 after that. So obviously he's been a more natural, like you said, he's built it up over time. Bud would just jump up there off rip. And I think Bud walks around in like that 170 area, but a walk around weight and then cutting weight and then rehydrating is a whole different situation where Canelo will walk in the ring probably 190-ish, 180, something like that.
And when you look at Canelo, he's a thick boy like that. Canelo is not barely 168. He's barely making it on the back end. You know what I'm saying? Like he's like you said, he's probably walking around 190, 200 easy. You know what I'm saying? And he has to cut down to the 168. And he's probably walking into the ring fight night 180, 190. Bud will if that fight happens, Bud will be in the ring at 165. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I think that it's different taking those punches, from a dude, who's naturally bigger than you. It's different. You know what I mean? Even if he wins the fight, I don't think his career will be the same. You look at Roy, right? Went up to heavyweight. Yeah, he won the fight, but he was never the same. You know what I mean? Heavyweight punches take a toll. They take years, baby. You know what I mean? So when you're coming up that many weight classes, you know what I mean? That's dangerous. But all that said, sign me the fuck up. I'd watch that shit.
100%, yeah. And I have two comments still going back to the whole resume thing. So the first thing is that, yes, Canelo does have a better resume than Crawford. But I went out nitpick in a second, but I think Canelo's resume kind of gets overvalued a bit sometimes. It's still probably the best in the sport just from just all the names he's fought. But just like any resume, you can kind of poke at it a little bit. And I think Crawford's resume is a bit undervalued, if anything. It's not, like I said, I think Canelo still has a better resume, but I'm going to in a second kind of break him down real quick. But when you look at him, I think it's not as drastic as some people think, though. Canelo has much more of the very good wins. But I think, like you said, Terence, with what he was able to do to Errol, I think was just that next level. And then also, this is a famous thing, but your resume does not fight for you. No matter how good the resume is, when you step in the ring, you step in the ring as a fighter. I was one of the guys making the argument for Spence to win. Why are people saying Spence would win? Yeah, he was bigger, stronger. He thought he was better with his fundamentals. He thought he had the big, strong jab. But it was also because of the resume. How many times have we seen Bivol and Canelo? Who had the better resume? Canelo. Well, it didn't help him on fight night. Spence had a better resume than Bud. That didn't help him on fight night. Like, just those things. It's a huge indicator. It helps on pound for pound list. It helps you prove yourself. But it's not the end-all, be-all in these fights either. Even going to Canelo's resume, very good resume still, but as someone who, I don't want to see me like a Canelo hater, but I'm just showing an example of what you can do to nitpick a resume. Still a very good resume, borderline great resume, but you could say, all right, he beat Shane Mosley and he beat Cotto, but those guys are both very old. He fought Floyd, he lost to Floyd. He beat Erislandy Lara, but a lot of people thought he lost that fight, for example. So that's a great fighter he beat, but did he really win that fight? Who knows? He beat Amir Khan, that was a welterweight. He beat Liam Smith. Good win, but we've seen Liam Smith lose to Eubank. We've seen him lose to Munguia. He beat Chavez. I'll just skip that one. The first Golovkin fight was a draw. A lot of people thought he lost. The second Golovkin fight, I thought he won, but some other people still thought he lost. And even if he won, that's beating a great fighter, but just kind of by the skin of your teeth. Then Rocky Fielding, skip that one. Danny Jacobs, a really good win. I'm not sure if it's a great win, but it's a really good win. I still think Spence is probably a better win, but I think that's a really good win. Kovalev was a really good win on paper. That was also a Kovalev who got the fight on short notice. Kovalev had already been knocked out by Eliander Alvarez. Anthony Yard had almost stopped him. And he was also drinking and stuff. He wasn't as fully motivated as he used to be, and he retired shortly after. Then Callum Smith, a good win. Billy Joe Saunders, good win. Plant, a good win. But none of those wins in Ryder's a decent win. But to me, I think that Canelo, like we said, has the more depth. If you want to say who has the better names as a whole, I think Canelo definitely does. But even if you go to Crawford's side, the Spence win to me is what sets him apart. He's got a lot of filler wins. Like, I don't care that he knocked out Avanesian, really cool. I don't care he knocked out Mean Machine. I don't care about Khan or Jose Benavidez. Okay. Kell Brook was a bit older, so even I'll kind of leave that be. That's not some great win. Sean Porter is a good win. Victor Postol is a win that's like, it's not a super win, but that was a very, very good win at the time. Postol was undefeated.
At the time that they fought, yeah.
There was a unification. He had just knocked out Lucas Matisse, who was a big name back then. In hindsight, it's one of those things that people kind of forget how big of a fight that was at that time. And even the Gamboa fight, I know Gamboa was smaller. Gamboa was moving up. But Gamboa, he was a bit inactive at that time. He had the promotional issues. But Gamboa was also a pound-for-pound guy. And that fight was almost 50-50 on the odds. I think Crawford was like a minus 135. So it's easy to say, looking back at it now, oh, he beat a small Gamboa, but that's not how it was looked at the time. And he fought a different version of Gamboa than Tank fought, than Haney fought, and the Isaac Cruz fought. He still fought a Gamboa who was undefeated. So I say all that to say that at the end of the day, Canelo does have the better resume. I think his is still a bit overvalued. Crawford's is a bit undervalued, and your resume doesn't fight for you at the end of the day. So I still think that Canelo would be the favorite based on his size, but skills pay the bills, and that's a fight I'd be interested in seeing.
Bro, if you look at their last 10 opponents, right? The weakest win for Bud is Jeff Horn, a guy who beat Manny Pacquiao.
I would say Avanesian is probably his weakest win, but Horn is up there too, the guy he beat.
Look,
I see what you're saying, though. Fair.
Pretty much ended, Shane Mosley's career, bro. So I'm gonna give him that, bro.
Yeah.
And I get it. He's trash otherwise. But and Mosley is what he is at that point. But a dude who ends a great fighter's career, it's just like Joe Smith Jr. You know what I mean? You got to give the dude credit. He ended B-Hop's career. A lot of other guys couldn't do that, by the way.
Yeah, that's fair. It was a 50-year-old Shane, but I'll give. All right, I see your point.
Right. My thing is this: Jeff Horn beat a guy that one time couldn't. You feel me?
Yeah. And whether or not he beat him or not on the record, he's still beat him.
That fight was close enough, right? Where if you're a Jeff Horn supporter, you can say he won. I thought he lost.
Yeah.
But again, the fight was close enough.
Yeah. It wasn't as bad as the Tim Bradley decision. I think people think it was as bad as that one, but it was a fight. Even if you thought Manny won, it wasn't as bad as the Bradley decision or some of these other ones we've seen for sure.
Even if you think he lost, he was really competitive with an all-time great. You feel me? Way more competitive than people thought he was going to be, right? People thought he was going to come in there and knock Jeff Horn out in like the third round. Jeff Horn was in that whole fucking fight. To me, when I look at their most recent fight, I mean, you can nitpick Amir Khan because he got zero chin. You know what I mean? And he stopped him. But that's actually an opponent they share. Yeah. I used to tell people all the time, like when they were saying Errol Spence has, they like you said, the argument was Errol Spence has a way better resume, and I'm like, where? You know what I mean? Recently, maybe, I don't know. He's got a better resume in the welterweight division.
Yeah,
but
and that's what it was.
That Bud's been fighting in different divisions. You know what I mean? So, and yeah, those guys might not be big time now or where they're at now, but at the time that he was fighting them, these were legit dudes. Like you said, when he fought Victor Postol, what he was coming off of, Matisse was considered a beast when Postol knocked him out, bro. So it's like, yeah, Postol might not be that now, but shit, at the time he was fighting him, you got to give him credit for what he did when he did it. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and Jesus is with you too. He's saying you got to give credit to Horn. He fought more than go. So, like you said, the talent might not have been there at the highest level, but he was going to be in there and fight. So, I do got to give him credit for that and respect for sure.
I mean, real shit, bro. Like, if you wanted to be real super nitpicky, I mean, what the I mean, okay, he knocked out Hank Lundy and Derry Jean, and we got to go back to what 2015. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? You got to go back 8 years to find a fight that's that's trash. You know what I mean? And all right, okay, but Canelo just fought a dude most people have to Google,
Mhm.
John Ryder. Like I didn't know who the fuck he was. You know what I mean? And I followed the division. But when you consider who he's fought recently, yeah, these guys are great, but it's not as big of a stretch, like you said.
Yeah, no, exactly. And to be fair, like you said, I nitpick Canal, so you can nitpick Crawford. You can say, "Oh well, Kell Brook was going down to 147 again. He was weight drained. Mean Machine hasn't proved anything. Khan has no chin. Benavidez was on one leg. Such a shows you or at 140, and Dongo didn't do much and has been dominated since then. But you could do that for any resume. You could say, oh well, Sugar Ray Leonard beat Hagler, but Hagler was off for 3 years, and then Sugar Ray Leonard beat Duran, but that was after Duran made the whole weight cut and all those things. You could say, oh, when this guy beat this guy. They only beat Muhammad Ali off the layoff. Like, it's like you could go and do all those things people do with Floyd's resume. So at the end of the day, your resume does not fight for you.
But here's the thing, right? You can do that if you want to. You can nitpick Bud's
Mm-hmm.
resume if you want to. But did he clearly win those fights?
Yeah,
Are
no
there
nitpick
any
in that Spence fight, or any of
are
them.
there any fights on his record where you go, I think he lost that fight? You might be able to find one
No, I
on
don't even
on
think you could
Bud's
do that.
yeah, on Bud's resume. You might be able to find one. And I said might if you're being super critical, right? There's just looking off of his fights since 2017. There's like 6 fights Canelo should have as L's, bro. Like in my opinion, you know what I mean? Where you could say, hey, I think he lost that fight. I think he fought a faded Daniel Jacobs. You know what I'm saying? He didn't fight Danny at his prime. It's still a good win. I think he lost both the Golovkin fights, in my opinion. Um, the Amir Khan thing is you got to give Amir Khan credit for even taking that fight.
Hell
He took that
yes.
fight with nobody wanted to fight
Mm-hmm.
Canelo. You know what I'm saying? And he knows he has no chin. So, you take that into consideration. And at the time that he fought Miguel Cotto, that should have been a much easier fight for him.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what I mean? James Kirkland, come on, bro. That's laughable. Erislan De Lara, again, I thought he lost. And Alfredo Angulo. Again, it's you know what I mean? And really, up until he caught Austin Trout, that was a much more competitive fight than I thought it needed to be. So I don't know, bro. It's and Josecito Lopez, God bless him. He'll fight anybody. But he had no
You
business
ain't
fighting
turning
Canelo.
down the smoke. Yeah.
Yeah. He had no business being in the ring with Canelo. But again, it's another one of those guys you got to give him credit for having the balls to sign up for the assignment. And again, Shane Mosley, he should have, again, at the time that he was fighting Shane Mosley, he should have knocked Shane Mosley out. And he got a decision. That's just my opinion, bro. So yeah, he went 12 rounds with Matthew Hatton. Think about that. I don't know. That's just me. But again, that and we're saying all that again to be nitpicky, right? This is the nitpicky version of nibs.
Yeah.
And like you said, resumes don't fight for you.
Yeah, all we're doing is we're just proving, like I said, resumes don't fight for you, and we're saying just you can nitpick honestly any resume in the history of boxing. You can say we're not sitting here and saying, oh, these guys haven't proven shit. They both. I've sit here and said that Canelo has a better resume than Crawford. We're just showing that as an example that you can kind of show certain things aren't always what they seem.
Like you
too,
said,
on paper.
you could take every dude in the pound for pound list, right? And nitpick his resume if you really wanted to be an asshole. You know what I mean? You could do it with Floyd. You could do it with Manny. Like you said, you could do it with Mike Tyson. Sugar Rays, all the Sugar Rays. You know what I mean? You if you want to nitpick, you can. But let's face it, these dudes gave us fights we wouldn't have got. They were the best of what they were doing, and Canelo is that too, bro. Like let's face it, even if I was one of these super nitpicky assholes, I'm still tuning in to watch Canelo fight. I don't give a fuck who he's fighting because he's fucking Canelo.
Yeah, no, that's facts at the end of the day. So we'll switch over now to, we'll keep it on Terence Crawford. We'll move over now to Errol Spence. He did activate the rematch clause. So I'll leave this to you first because I'm sure you're going to have the same thought. You thought of even the first time going around, but Do you see anything that Spence could even do the second time around? Is he just doing it because it's more of a bigger payday and just I think his pride also isn't letting him kind of step aside? What are your thoughts on him taking the rematch? And is there anything that you think he could help maybe turn around?
The only thing that's intriguing about this fight is if it's at 154. That's the only thing that makes this fight worth signing up to watch again. Because I think, and I said this before, people thought I was crazy. When James Toney came on our show and we interviewed him, and he said that Bud was gonna kick Spence's ass, I had to go back and start watching everything. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we were both there when he said it, and I think we both had the same reaction. Like, but then you go back and you watch what they do. I don't think that Spence is going to be able to fix all the things that he can't do to Bud that quickly, bro. So I don't think it matters what weight class they fight at. I think you'll have a better chance at 154 than 147 because Spence, you know, let's give him his flowers and give him his respect. He's been draining himself to make 147 for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's been talking about going up to 154. He's a big dude. He's not, you know, he's not a little guy. So he should be fighting at 154, if not 160 already. So maybe that helps him. You know, maybe he's not as drained. Maybe he's not as lethargic. His timing is better. So maybe it does make for a more competitive fight. But I still think that if Bud doesn't knock him out, it's a one-sided fight again, bro. I just think it's one-sided either way, no matter what weight class they're fighting in.
Yeah, I would love to see Errol make it. Even if he's not going to win, I'd like to see him kind of do like what Deontay Wilder did with Fury in the third fight, for example. Maybe you're not going to win the fight. Maybe it kind of ends up as the same result. But do you
But it
show
means a
life in
classic.
those mid rounds? Yeah. Do you buckle Bud's legs for a second? Do you kind of control a few rounds early on where they're like, hold on a second? So maybe is it enough to win the fight? Probably not. But do you do just enough to kind of satisfy yourself at the end of the day and say, okay, I lost this guy, but I gave a better performance, a performance that I knew I could kind of give. I'm going to go.
Or maybe he gets lucky and catches Bud slipping.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that could happen. I mean, it's unlikely, but he's got enough power, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of, it's hard to say, but I think it was a combination of that was one of the worst versions of Spence that we've seen. And I think that was the best night of Terence Crawford's life, honestly, as a boxer. And who knows, maybe Terence can repeat that every time out against Spence because he can just get up for him. The argument can now be, after beating the guy so bad, can you get up for the fight the same way that you did the last time around? Or is it going to even make a difference? Even if he doesn't get up for it, is it going to make a difference? Because I still think that the counter punching of Terence, which is what you had always said before, that's the difference in these fights. I think that for everything Errol does well, just the way Terence, even when Errol's at his best, Terence will still have the ability to counterpunch him and see certain shots. And even if he's giving up rounds and getting hit, as long as he's not hurt too bad, I think the threat of the counter will always be there. But I'm going to go a step further because you had mentioned about the fight being at 154. And Sean Zeitel on Fight Hype was saying this on his last stream, so I want to give him credit for it. But I'm going to steal it because I think it's a real good idea. But why not make the rematch at 160? It seems kind of crazy, but I'll kind of lay out why I think you could do it. If you're Errol, it gives you even more weight. You think you're the bigger, stronger guy. So being at 160 would help even more than 154. If you're Terence and you're really talking about this Canelo fight, you're talking about carrying up the weight. Why not carry, or even make the fight at 168 even, but at least 160, you can work on carrying the weight up to 160 against the guy you already beat in a little test run. Say, okay, I already beat Spence. We'll run it back at a higher weight so I can see if I can carry that weight against a guy like Canelo. So is it realistic? Probably not, but I thought it was a pretty cool idea, and there's points behind it that would make a lot of sense. So what do you kind of think about that idea?
That would make it interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, makes it a completely different fight. You're right. I don't think it's something that'll realistically come off. Not because I don't think either guy can make the weight. I think they can comfortably. I think if you're Bud, why would you? Right? Because you're giving Spence another advantage, right? Or another weapon in his toolbox to potentially beat you. You know what I mean? In the rematch. If I'm Bud, I'm holding all the cards. So I'm like, I'm not giving you shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, if anything, I'll give you the 154. So there's no excuses, right? Because I think that's I think that's kind of Bud's top end as far as an elite performer,
Hmm.
right? I think he can be elite at 154. I think he could possibly be elite at 160. I'd have to
With
see
this
him.
landscape right now, I'd say
Yeah.
probably
Oh
against an
yeah.
all-time great middleweight, maybe not, but today's day and age, I think
Yeah.
he definitely could.
Yeah. If you put him in against anybody at 160 right now, he's a unified champ. Period.
Hmm.
Um, However, you're fighting a guy who, up until you fought him, was on your level, right? So, and like you said, I think it was a combination of Bud being better, right? But also, like you said, having the fight of his life, and Errol having the worst night of his life. It's in the ring anyway. And then we also have to take into consideration, bro. This has been brought up several times by other publications, and we mentioned it a couple of times. But Errol Spence has been in 3 major accidents.
Hmm.
That shit take look. As a person who was in a major accident, getting hit by a drunk driver, I can tell you that shit changes you. You're different after that. He's been in 3, bro.
Hmm.
So that also, fuck the concussions you get from punches. A concussion from an accident, that shit lasts with you for life.
Yeah, especially when
So
you land on your face going as fast as he was going too. He had no cushion on that fall. You fall right in your fucking face.
Roy Jones said that shit. I think it was
Mhm.
on Fight Hype. He said it, in a couple of interviews actually, where he's saying, "Look, this dude's been in 3 major accidents. I don't think he's the same. Period." He wasn't even talking about fighting Bud.
Mhm.
He was just talking
Talk
about
about
fighting.
anyone.
Period.
And
He
mhm.
right. He says, "I don't think Errol Spence should be in the ring at all right now." And as a guy who's fought well past his prime, you know what I mean? He's someone who can speak to that. So, you know, I think we got to monitor that too, bro. Somebody, or at least somebody, should be saying to Errol Spence, "Hey, is it time to retire?" Not because of how bad you got your ass whooped in the last fight, but are you medically going to be ready to go, bro? Like, are you really recovered? Or are you just saying that because you're a dog, and you want to fight just like any other fighter would? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what I think it is. Clearly he wasn't the better man than Terrence that night, but I think he has all the dog necessary. Not just he has all the dog possible in him. There's no bitch in Errol at all. So I think the ego and those things are gonna force him to take this rematch no matter what. I think that no matter how the first fight went, and that went as basically as bad as it could have. He was even in the locker room post fight talking to his son saying, "We're gonna get this one back." So I think that, like you said, even if it's a wilder kind of situation where if you lose the fight, but you do enough to kind of make people think and kind of still give the fans a classic level fight. So to play devil's advocate to your point, because you did bring up a good point where I think it would be Crawford could see it as an advantage for Spence going up to 160, but you could also look at it this way and say, well, if I can't beat Spence at 160 or 168, I definitely can't beat Canelo. So is it a good kind of, and then you're running the risk still, but I think that with how the first fight went, it might be a gamble he could be willing to take just to at least carry that weight for a fight and kind of see how it plays out.
I think at 160, we'd be getting a classic fight, bro.
Mm-hmm.
I think Errol Spence and Bud Crawford at 160 would probably go down in history as one of the best middleweight fights, period. You know what I'm saying? For 2 guys that are brand new to the division, because I think that does look. I'm on record of saying this shit a million times. I hate fighters who cut a shitload of weight
Mm-hmm.
just to fight in a certain division. You've heard me say it ad nauseum. You probably get tired of me saying it.
It's true.
If Spence is going to fight at 160, it's look, your body is going to react different when it's fighting at a more natural weight. Spence probably walks around, like you said, 180, 190. You know what I'm saying? Naturally.
At least in the 170s, I'd say probably at least 170 for sure.
So let's say he walks around 175, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get down to 160, that ain't shit. That's sparring sessions. You get down, you can
Mm-hmm.
lose that weight. You lose that your first couple of weeks in the training camp just off of
Mm-hmm.
the cutting off the bullshit, and the water weight and all that. Bud probably walks around a little bit closer to his fighting weight than most other guys, right? So he's probably around like maybe 160. which is the weight he'll be fighting in.
Mhm.
So that would give Spence an advantage. But I think Bud's skill would be the neutralizer,
Mhm.
right? So Bud would have that skill, but then Spence's skill would be a little bit enhanced because he's not
Mhm.
drained
Yeah,
for
the
the fight.
punch resistance would be better. All those things. Hmm.
Right. And then, you're talking about timing. He wouldn't be lethargic. He's not going to be, maybe that helps with everything else, right? Maybe that helps with his recovery from his injuries to his accident, not having to constantly be worried about cutting that weight. Um, so I think at 160, the it's interesting that you bring that up because my mind's been spinning ever since you said it. That
Hmm.
would be an all-time classic fight, I think. I still think for my money because I just can't bet against him after what he did
Hmm.
to Spence the first time, bro. I would still take Bud, but yeah, you're right. That could give us Wilder Fury 3 vibes.
And as much as I'd love to see my boy Spence get his get back, I still think no matter the weight, I think it's the counter punching of Terrence and the sharpness he has. Even if Errol's able to take the shots better, he's still going to be getting hit with those shots. So I think maybe he'd get outboxed at that point. But I still think that it was an interesting point. I know Sean Zytel I brought it up, so I wanted to give him credit. But figured I wanted to talk about it a little bit too because it's something I had never thought of. And when he mentioned it, I was like, you know what? It would make sense even for both guys because Spence for them moving up to strong enough for Crawford. If you're going to fight Canelo, why not kind of dip your toes at a higher weight? But that's something that we shall see. Is it realistic? No, but who knows? It's still a talking point, and we've seen crazier things in boxing, so you never know for sure.
Hey, the best thing for boxing is for Errol Spence to win the rematch because
Mhm.
then that'll give us a very legit trilogy, right? And it'll I think if he wins the rematch and then Bud comes back and does what he did again in from the first fight, right? That builds a Canelo fight, you know,
Mhm.
it'll be one of those things where okay, Canelo, you got to take it now. You know what I mean? Especially like if they were to make that fight at 160 and Bud did the same thing, people are like, hey, sign the contract. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? But if Bud struggles, then you know but I do think that for boxing, maybe not so much for Bud, obviously, but I think for the sport of boxing, a trilogy would be the shit.
Yeah, it would be. I would love to see my boy Errol do that. I'm not going to bet on him to do that for sure, but we'll see if the rematch does happen. Obviously, a lot of factors going on with that. We got to see how Spence recovers. We got to see what the hell happens with Bomac, but
I
we
still
shall
think
see
I
on that
still
one.
think it's so funny, bro. Like I swear to God, I literally said, "There's no way in the hell I don't give a shit what Butter Spence does." After watching that anyway destruction of
Hmm.
Stephen Fulton, I just was like, "There's no way you can do better than that." That was a virtuoso performance, and then I feel like Bud was like, "Hold my beer."
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
that was a big week for you because you made all the right picks. The one thing I'll take credit for is I said, let's hold on a second now. Let's see how Saturday goes. And never in my right mind that I think that's what we're going to see. But you never too sure. And Bean brings up a good point. What if Canelo gets beat? In my opinion, I mean, if Canelo gets beat by a Benavidez or something like that, I still think the Crawford fight is a fight to make. Maybe it's not for titles at that point, but I think that's fight such a super fight, and it would still be, oh, Canelo lost to Benavidez, but Benavidez is the younger, bigger, stronger guy. Wouldn't be as big of a fight, but I think that that's a fight that even if Canelo were to lose at some point, just like the Spence fight once upon a time, I thought even if he lost to Benavidez, I thought the Spence fight was a possibility. So wouldn't be as big per se, but I still think it could definitely happen. But it's an interesting point to
Now,
bring
what
up.
if Charlo beats him?
That's the interesting
Right?
point. Mhm.
So what if Charlo beats him, and then Bud and Spence gets made at 154? Bud's, spanks Spence again, and then Bud gets to fight, Charlo.
Mhm.
That would be you talk about big time, bro. Because then Charlo can say, "Hey, I'm the man at 168. I'm the
Mhm.
man at 154. Meet me maybe at 160 or some shit like that." You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you talk about that. That opens a lot of doors. if Canelo loses to if he loses this fight to Charlo, we keep saying this shit like it's a given.
Mhm.
He's finna
Yeah. And
beat
I've
Charlo.
said it before. That ain't no given. It's no given for sure. I I lean Canelo in that fight based on the weight, but if Charlo's able to take those punches, we shall see on that one. So that
I,
ain't a
I
given.
lean
That's no
heavy.
lock or anything like that.
I lean heavy on Canelo, but it's one. Charlo's a dog, right? He's proven that in the past, right? And he's proven to be one of those guys where he can learn in the ring. You know what I'm saying? He's not just a knockout artist. The boy can box. And physically, he's bigger than Canelo. Height and all that jazz. I'm just saying, weirder things have happened. But, let's say he doesn't lose, but it's a much harder fight for him. Then it's like, hey, well, he just fought a guy who's naturally smaller than him. You guys been fighting 154.
Yeah, a guy that a lot of people would pick Bud to beat Jermell too. So I think that even goes to your point even more. But to answer Bean's question, being real, if Canelo gets beat, they'll make a rematch and they'll probably find any way they can to rob Jermell so they can keep Canelo as the champion. We know how these things work, so it would be cool to see Jermell win. They would run it back. I'd like to see him then win the second time, but we shall see on that one. But that is a good point to bring up because we were kind of talking about it as it's a given, and neither one of us think it is a given for sure.
Unless your name is Floyd Mayweather, you're not getting a decision against Canelo. And even they even tried to rob him. So come on, bro.
His was a majority decision. Bivol won 10 rounds and it was 7-5, and he had to win the last 3 rounds to win. So I think that kind of says all we need to say on that one for sure.
You have to stop Canelo at this point to get a dub, bro.
Or win wide.
But even then, like you said,
that is close. Yeah, you got to win wide. You got to win damn near every single round.
Like we said, most of us give Bivol 9-3, 10-2 in that fight, and he won 7-5, bro. And had to.
Canelo was winning after 9 rounds, Canelo was winning that fight after 9 rounds, and we had him down like 8-1, 7-2. So we shall see on that. A lot of X factors go into all those guys, what can happen. But we'll touch on next a fight that is happening. It was just announced for November 16th, a Thursday night in Las Vegas. So with the F1 weekend, Shakur Stevenson is going to fight Frank Martin for the vacant WBC title. This is a fight that I love. I think that Shakur is one of those guys who, on the eye test, seems like he is a pound for pound guy, could maybe become the pound for pound number 1 guy. He's still kind of looking to get those signature wins. I know Valdez was a big win for him, but we saw what Navarrete then did to Valdez. And Valdez, a good fighter. To go to Canelo's point, Valdez is a good fighter. He's not a great fighter, though. So Shakur is still looking for that great fighter. I'm not sure that Frank Martin is that a great fighter per se. I mean, they're all great fighters, but we're talking about on the level of being the top guy in the weight class. He's a very, very good fighter, quality fighter, and I think he has some athleticism and certain things that Shakur hasn't had to deal with. I'm still picking Shakur without a doubt, but I'm interested to see how this fight plays out. So what are your thoughts on, we've talked about it before, but now that it's official, what do you think about Shakur and Frank Martin? And also it being on a Thursday night, do you care at all about that? Because that's been a big talking point that people have mentioned also.
Yeah, I mean, I don't give a shit what day of the week it is.
Yeah, it could be on a Monday at 5 a.m. and we would watch it. So who cares?
Yeah, I mean, it's Shakur Stevenson, bro. I mean, I'm going to watch that. That's a bad boy. You know what I mean? And he's along the lines of one of my favorite in the sport is he's an actual boxer. He's not just a fighter. And I love that about Shakur. I think it's too early for Frank Martin. If you look at his last fight, right, he was fighting a real guy. This is a dude who went to the Olympics. I think he got a medal.
Bronze medalist in the Olympics. Yep, undefeated Olympic bronze medalist. Yep.
I thought he was beating Frank. If I'm being honest,
he was for a while.
And if he doesn't take that knee, I think Frank might have been on my scorecards. If he doesn't take that knee, he wins the fight. You know what I'm saying? And I had it closer than some of them scorecards. I mean, they had it 115, 112.
I think that's what I had it for Frank. But close fight, and some swing rounds it could have definitely led the other way for sure. Definitely close fight.
I think I had it 114, 113. You know what I'm saying? So if he doesn't take that knee, but anyway, he gets the dub. But I think he's in for a rude awakening against Shakur Stevenson, bro. We always say it's cliche as hell now, but it's true. There's levels to this game. Shakur is already on. Shakur could be fighting pretty much anybody, you know what I mean, in the division. He could be fighting Loma. He could be fighting Tank. He could be fighting Haney. And if not be, a favorite, it'd be a very close dog in any of those
Hmm.
fights. Frank Martin shouldn't even be considered to fight any of those guys at this point yet, and he's getting to fight Shakur. So I think it's going to be a rude awakening from him. I'm pretty sure he's going to come with his best, and he'll do favorable. But I think it's easy work for Shakur, bro.
Yeah, and Frank Martin is someone who I was always high on because I saw the attributes he had. He got into the sport late. I think he's 27, 28 now. I don't think he started boxing until he was like almost 20 years old. But you can see
Yeah.
he does certain things. Even Jesus Sam Frank is old enough, but the experience is not yet there. One thing he does do is he does certain things that some guys who other also started like Joshua or someone even a Wilder to a point. He's able to do certain things athletically that those guys aren't. And Wilder's able to do some of these things too, but Frank's able, he's very educated with his feet. He's a very good counterpuncher. Counterpunching is a thing that takes years and years and years. Anthony Joshua is still not really a counterpuncher. He's been doing it. Errol Spence isn't really a counterpuncher. Some guys will never be counterpunchers, but Frank Martin's been able to do those things. And that's why he's been able to get to the world scene a lot faster than people thought. People forget, but just about 3-4 years ago, he was on club shows. That's why we always talk about supporting your local club shows, because you never know. He gets aligned with Spence and Derek James, wins a few fights. Now he's fighting Shakur Stevenson for a title. So if I'm for Frank Martin, these are some of the things that I'm looking for him to do if it's going to be a close fight. He's got to use his explosiveness and his athleticism. He's got to close the distance. He cannot let Shakur dictate range. Shakur is one of the best fighters in the sport, maybe the best fighter in the sport at dictating range, being able to be at mid-range and be in a spot where he's able to hit you, but you can't hit him back. Frank Martin's going to have to be able to press that. He's going to also have to let his hands go. The one thing I see, which is kind of a thing I've seen with Jermell Charlo a bit before in the first Casano fight and some of the Harrison fights, where they look for the perfect punch. We also saw Frank Martin do it in his last fight, where it seems like Frank is waiting too much, and we saw him kind of let his hands go once he hurt Artem later on in the fight, but it seems like he kind of takes a little bit to get going. But there's not going to be, you don't have any feel out time against Shakur Stevenson. You can't go behind 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds because it becomes you're down 12 rounds. So I think that he's got to use his athleticism, his explosiveness. He cannot let Shakur dictate range, and you got to let those hands go. Whether you're hitting the body, the arm, the elbows, you can't wait for the perfect shot, and you got to kind of go at him. A lot easier said by me and my house sitting in this chair than him actually going out and doing it. But I think those are some of the keys that he can use. So do you think it's just kind of a 12-0 fight, Shakur? I think the thing a lot of people are looking for Shakur is just a moment of adversity, at least a little bit, because he hasn't really faced, not even at all. He hasn't faced any adversity so far in his pro career. Is this a fight where we could see maybe a moment where Martin gets him with the good shot and makes him kind of reassess things, or do you think it is just a complete whitewash throughout the whole time?
I think Shakur is way too good to get caught with something slipping. You know what I mean? Unless you are on his level as a boxer first, right? Like here's what people have to understand and respect. You have to be on his level as a boxer first for me to even talk about your power, right? I can't talk about your power if you aren't even close to his level as a boxer, right? And it's like, Inoue Fulton. I thought Fulton was levels above Inoue as a boxer.
Yeah,
Find out he ain't
we thought wrong on that one.
wrong as fuck on that shit, right? So so I thought, hey, because of that, the power of Inoue can kind of get neutralized, right? Because Fulton's supposed to be so much better as a boxer. Again, completely wrong.
Then we saw Inoue beating him with the jab in the first 2 rounds. We're like, well,
Right.
hold on now. I don't know about this anymore.
So Inoue becomes not only the better, much harder puncher, obviously, than most people in the sport, but he's also the better boxer. I think Shakur doesn't get credit for hitting as hard as he does because people don't rush in on Shakur either. He's kind of like the Floyd effect, right? Like he hits you hard enough to give you pause. Like, oh, wait a minute, I can't just be running in on this dude. And he can hit you whenever he wants, and you can't do that to him. So until he faces somebody who I think can get to him and test his chin, there's no point in talking about the power. I don't think Frank Martin. He might land a couple punches here or there, but I don't think it'll be anywhere near enough to do any damage for Shakur to ever be worried in his fight.
Yeah, I'd love to see Frank make this a great, highly competitive fight. I'm still waiting I do want to see how Shakur responds to adversity, but I'm I'm not so sure. I think there might be a few moments in this fight where Frank could have moments, but like you said, besides outside of moments, I think Shakur will just be. I think he's too good, and he'll be able to kind of just dictate and kind of just win his way as he's been doing so far.
And again, I will say this because I don't want people to think that we're just shitting on these guys, right? Like you said, Frank Martin came from being a club fighter to now getting a world title fight in short order. And he did it off of hard work, dedication, and skills. So, I was on record the last time we were on air saying I don't think he even deserves this fight. I was wrong. He does deserve his shot, right? Because he earned it. You know what I mean? Do I think that he's fought the level of talent needed to get a title fight? No. But he's earned his position to be even considered as an opponent at this point. So you got to give it to him. And hey, look, none of us gave Kambosos a shot in hell to beat Tio. Nobody gave what's his name? Shit. Nobody gave Castillo a chance against Floyd the first time around, and a lot of people think he won that fight. Right? So we can go on and on and on. Yeah. Nobody gives these guys a chance, and they end up fucking winning. So
yeah,
you never know.
Yeah, nobody but you gave Andy Ruiz a chance. We saw how that turned out. So I'll give you credit for that one for sure. But even with Frank Martin, it's not like I see people saying like, "Oh, Frank Martin's gonna get exposed," this and that. Like that kind of pissed me off because listen. You guys, boxing fans, always cry and complain about how we don't get these fights. We don't get these undefeated guys fighting each other, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And then once they fight each other, guys are exposed. Like Errol Spence loses to Bud. People saying, oh, well, was Spence ever even a great fighter? It's like, bro, come on now. Like that's something that it aggravates me because we want to see these big fights. If Frank Martin loses to Shakur, did he get exposed? No. Did he lose to the better fighter? Yes. Frank Martin, the night he fought Michel Rivera, when he opened as an underdog, closed as a slight favorite, and pitched a shutout, showed that he is a legit world-class fighter, and that cannot now be taken away from him, no matter what happens against Shakur Stevenson. Will he show that he might be like a B+, A- level guy against an A+ guy? Sure. But I hate the narratives that these guys just get exposed and that, oh, this guy's got no chance, this and that, or this guy, or once someone loses that, oh, was this guy even that good anyways? Because, well, then what do we want these guys? So we say we don't want these guys to just protect their records, and then once they lose, they're hype job. So what do you kind of think on that? Because I just think that Frank Martin's already against Michel Rivera. I think he proves he's a legit contender guy, and I think that can't be taken from him no matter what happens against Shakur.
I mean, if we're saying that, then we're saying Canelo isn't shit either. When he lost to Floyd, we're saying that Diego Corrales wasn't shit because he lost to Floyd. We're saying that, I mean, you if you fight an all-time great, bro, and you lose, Hasim Rahman knocked out Lennox Lewis. Yeah, he got knocked out in the rematch, but is that to say he's a shit fighter because he got knocked out the second time around? Is he the greatest of all time? No, but the dude's was a world champion. He was able to support his entire family off of boxing. He had a very good career. You look at Charles Martin. He just lost to Jared Anderson, right? Is that to say he's a shit fighter? No, he's at the tail end of his career fighting a guy at that time when he should have, and he damn near won. Like
no kidding.
He almost stopped that boy.
A few more seconds. That was a 12-round fight. Who knows what happens?
You feel me? That fifth round, bro. I thought it was woo.
Yeah, even he had full camp too, which you said before. So
if he had a full camp, right? So look, just because a guy takes an L, and again, we're talking about Jared Anderson, who could go on to become one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, right? This dude could be a champ in a couple of years. So, and again, we're talking about Shakur Stevenson, bro. He's
exactly.
pound for pound, and everybody's top 5. Just about. It should be in your top 10 if he's not top 5. We're talking about one of the best pound for pound fighters, and if Frank Martin loses to him, talking about retirement is ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? But this Frank Martin could very well get his ass completely whipped against Shakur Stevenson and bounce back and be fighting him 4 or 5 years from now in another unification fight because of what he learned from that.
Mm-hmm.
Look what Canelo learned from his loss to Floyd.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Hell, look what he learned in those fights with Triple G, bro.
Mm-hmm.
The great fighters learn from, the missteps in their career and go on to do better things.
Yeah, so we got my dad in the chat. He's with us. He says Shakur's skill
Ah!
shut. He said he shuts Frank Martin out fight night. I don't know if I can say that. I think this might be me liking Frank Martin a little too much. I'm gonna still say Frank wins a few rounds mixed in there, maybe 9-3, 10-2, but a shutout is definitely in the cards for sure. I think you got you got a shout out, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I knew that was I knew that was coming for sure. So I think a shutout could be in play. I hope he makes it a bit interesting and we'll kind of see. But on that note, we'll touch on one last thing before we leave. A bit of history. I know that about 15 years ago, they had 2 fights set like this, but Amanda Serrano is going to be in a title fight, not just a regular women's title fight of 10 2-minute rounds. She's going to be fighting 12 3-minute rounds. She is going to be fighting, I want to get the name right, Daniela Ramos in Orlando, October 27th, in 12 3-minute rounds. So this is something we've talked about a lot on this show because we advocate for women's boxing. We do touch on it almost as much as the men's when we have big fights, and just as much when we have the big fights. So what are your thoughts on just the impact, and I guess just your initial thoughts on hearing this news and the impact it can also make long-term in the sport for women's boxing?
What I want people to understand, right, is what Amanda Serrano is doing for women's boxing, bro. She's not the biggest name. You got the Clarissa Shields of the world, the Michaela Mayers. They're getting all the pub for good reason, right? Amanda Serrano is a 7-weight champion, legitimate champion. She's always beat them. What we say, you got to beat the man to beat a man. She's beat the man every time, right? She gave us her and Katie Taylor gave us one of the best fights, period. Not one of the best women's fights. One of the best fights, period, of all time, in Madison Square Garden, bro. The things, the fact that she brought Heather Hardy back and gave her a legacy fight, gave her an opportunity, a woman who was a pioneer for a lot of these girls that we're seeing fight nowadays, right? A lot of these girls saw Heather Hardy fight, and now they're wanting to fight. Gave her a chance to go out of her career with some money in her pocket. Now she's doing this, 12 rounds, 3 minutes. If that picks up, what that'll do for women's boxing, it completely changes the landscape. Because now you're talking about more money, potentially more knockouts, and that's what people want to see, right? People want asses in the seats. They want to see those knockouts. I do think that the reason we don't see, and I think it's the major reason, it's not the only, but I think it's the major reason you don't see more knockouts in women's boxing. It's because they got 2-minute rounds, you know what I mean? And their championship fights are 2 rounds shorter. And we've all seen it, even in the Serrano fight against Taylor, we say, if she had an extra minute in some of those rounds,
that 5th round especially,
fight's over, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And especially for some of these girls, a lot of these women were athletes before boxing, or they're athletes outside of boxing. If you've got that wind and your opponent doesn't, you know what I mean? Those deeper rounds, you're going to get, like you said, we see more TKOs than we do KOs nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to start getting some of those TKOs because a lot of these chicks are going to be, just their win just isn't going to be what it is. So when you get those girls that can go, for miles and miles and miles, outside of the ring, I'm here to tell you, if it catches on, women's boxing is just going to go this way.
And even someone like Clarissa Shields, who I think is pound for pound #1, the greatest women's boxer we've ever seen. The one knock on her that a lot of people say, and it's kind of just, like I said, nitpick things just like we were doing earlier, but it's like, oh, she doesn't have enough knockouts. Well, if you change the fights from 20 minutes to 36 minutes, it's not just a few extra minutes. You are doubling almost the fight time they have in the ring. 20 minutes to 36 minutes, an extra 16 minutes. I bet you would see more TKOs on their resume, on everybody's resume, because like you would say, like I said in the pre-show too, even in men's boxing, you see a lot more TKOs than you do just guys get completely leaned and just slept. So
and when do you see those? In the later rounds.
No, exactly. So I think that, to our point, would mean you'd have to change. A lot of women would have to change maybe their fighting style. So I think it's a gradual thing. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But I do think that it's something that's interesting, and I think that it would lead to more of the TKOs and stuff. But I'll switch and pose you a question because I saw Mauricio Suleiman's already been in the airways. And anytime there's anything box, he wants to kind of get his name and get himself in the limelight, as a lot of people do, but him especially. He always wants to be in the news. But he had said, because he's always been against the 12 3-minute rounds, and he is saying that he will not sanction, he will not allow the WBC belt to be on the line for the Amanda Serrano fight, even though she's undisputed champion, because it's 12 3-minute rounds. He had cited that they've done a lot of studies on just the brain impact and on those things. I don't know how old those studies are, but I think that you could also see a movement where maybe does women's boxing say, okay, we have 3 other belts. We don't care about the WBC belt. We'll move on and we'll just fight for 12 3-minute rounds for the other 3 titles. Or is that something that kind of holds it up? So what are your thoughts on Suleiman's comments? Do you think he has is he right, wrong? Are you indifferent on it? And just do you think that could have any effect on what Serrano and these women are trying to push for?
I'll say this first, right? I understand, because when you look at women's sports as a comparison to men's sports in all sports, right? Whether you were talking track and field, we're talking swimming, things like that, there are major differences in some of these sports for men versus women, right? So I get that part. But this is the fight game, bro. In MMA, do the women get to fight, 3-minute rounds as opposed to 5? Nah, they in there for them same 5-minute rounds, bro. And my thing is this: in the fight game, things are different. I think in the fight game, if you're going to have the balls to get into that ring, whether you're a male or a female, you should have to fight the same way. And a lot of these girls are training against men anyway, to help prepare them, for their fights against some of these heavier-handed women, right? So it's not like they're not already in there taking the punishment in training camps. Mm-hmm. So I think that, I think Suleiman's, his statement, although well-intended, it's bullshit, bro. And another thing too, people have to understand, a lot of these sanctioning bodies, the major sanctioning bodies, are now major sanctioning bodies recently. Like, 20, 30, 40 years ago, there was like 2 belts. You know what I mean? So there could come a time, to your point, where everybody else goes, okay, do we really need the green strap? Yeah, it's probably the most recognized worldwide, right? Because it's been around the longest as far as major titles go. But do we really need the green strap? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I mean, most people take the unified championship as the bigger one anyway. People in the sport, you know what I mean? I mean, there's other sanctioning bodies that could step in and take over, bro. So to your point, I mean, yeah. And plus, shit, who needs to be paying all these damn sanctioning fees anyway? Fuck out of here,
Exactly.
Into that point, I wish we had one strap. I wish there was just one belt and that was it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can agree on that too. And I just think that it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because a lot of variables. It's just a one-off for Serrano. Is Serrano's next fight going to be the same kind of format? I think we got to see, because the opponent also has to agree to it. She wanted to make the Katie Taylor fight 12 3-minute rounds also, but Katie Taylor has the right to still say, oh, no, we've always done this way. I'd want to get paid more and those kind of things. So, and she's always done it that way. And for her style is suited better. And a lot of the women, if their styles are suited better for 10 2-minute rounds, they're saying, well, why would I go to 12 3-minute rounds? It's only going to put me at a disadvantage and help out my opponent. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how this all plays out. A lot to still unpack, but I think the fact that we're getting the ball rolling, I think speaks more volumes.
And Serrano doesn't have to do it at this point in her career, right? That's another hat you have to take off to her, is because she, like, this could have been presented to her and she could have told whoever said it, kiss my entire ass. I'm Amanda motherfucking Serrano. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to do that, because she doesn't. She's made, way more money now. She's making anyway in her career than probably most fighters in the women's division are doing. And, she's putting on fucking classic fights, bro. So she doesn't really need to do it. The fact that she's willing to do it, I got to give her respect. And I hope she does do it again.
No, he's like, she's a true pioneer for sure, and just it's really cool to see kind of all these things that she's built, not only for Bucks for herself, but for other women too. So it'll be really cool. I'll be interested to see kind of how this plays out, if it kind of picks up more traction or if it dies out. But I hope it picks up more traction. Last thing I'll touch on real quick is there is a card going on right now, ESPN Plus card in Quebec, Canada. 2 fights on here. There's a lot of fights that have already gone on, but I think the last 2 fights are going to be starting soon. We have Steve Claggett against Carlos Sanchez in a fight at 140. I know Steve Claggett just had a win over Alberto Machado. Machado's past his prime now, but it's a decent name, and it's kind of a fight at 140. Just neither guy is going to be a world champion per se, but it should be an entertaining fight. And then the fight on that card that I'm really interested in is the main event, which I mentioned a bit earlier because a question asked about it. But it's Christian and Billy against Damon Nicholson. And Billy is 24-0 with 20 knockouts. He fights at 168. And I think he's a real sleeper in the division. Not a lot of people are talking about him. If you're not a hardcore fan, you might not know who he is. But I promise you, he's someone that you definitely will want to tune into. He had a fight with Carlos Gongora earlier this year, another legit ranked super middleweight. And that, to me, is one of the low-key fight of the year kind of fights. And you saw both guys hurt, and Billy showed that he's able to. He's always been a guy who's been able to dish it up, but we saw that he was able to take it and then still keep going. So I think that kind of speaks measures. He's fighting Damon Nicholson, a guy who's 26-5-1 now, but Nicholson has proven that he's game and he can go the distance. He was TKO'd by Jesse Hart before. Even Jesse Hart's a really good fighter. He came back, picked up some good wins, and he was the first one to end the streak with Berlanga. And he also had a fight with Demetrius Andrade, where he was dropped twice. He was shut out by Andrade, but he was able to go the distance. So are you familiar? I think you've seen a bit of him, Billy. Do you know anything about him? Are you looking forward to this fight against Nicholson? Nicholson's not a world beater, but I think it's a live body, so I'm interested to see and compare his results with the other guys and see how it turns out.
I think it's a competitive fight. And I think that my money, if I'm a betting man, is on him, Billy.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to be talking about this dude, in a couple of years. You know what I'm saying? But I would say that taking a fight against a guy like Nicholson, again, right? You have to be. It's one of those. I don't know if you can say it's a sleeper, but it's one of those fights where if you're not taking this guy too seriously,
it's a potential trap fight. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
Right.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he could already be counting his ducks. He could be saying, "Well, I'm winning this," and then there's some big money down. You got to take this dude very serious. So, I think it'll be a good fight. If he has taken him serious, I expect him to get him out of there in short work.
Yeah, no, so it's interesting because a lot of big names at 168. Maybe do we see in Billy against the Jaime Munguia? Do we see him get a title shot? Do we see him against the Billy Joe Saunders, the Caleb Plant, Berlanga, John Ryder? Like, there's a bunch of names out there. Maybe promotional-wise, some of those fights are hard to make. But 168, because it was a dead division once upon a time after Andre Ward left. It seems like it's starting to get its luster back, starting to pop a little bit now. So I hope he can kind of get in the mix there for sure, and kind of we'll see. But he's got to get past Nicholson first tonight, so we'll see kind of how that goes. I'm interested to see how it plays out.
It's crazy how 160 used to be the division, right? Where it was like that's where all the stars are. Now 168, even 175 is starting to get a little bit more traction than it has in recent years. Those are now the divisions where everything's cooking. And 154, you know what I mean? But yeah, it seems like 160 is just kind of forgotten about.
Yeah, and it's funny because that'll change, I'm sure, too, once if, let's say, a Terence or an Errol or Jermel moves back down to 160, Tim Tszyu, Jesus Ramos, those guys are going to be up at 160. So it's funny. Those things are always fluctuate, too. So in a few years, 160 will be a loaded division. Maybe once Boots and those guys move up, maybe 147's dead for a few years. Like, it's always kind of fluctuates. It's always in flux. So it'll be interesting to see. It's always interesting to see how these weight classes kind of play out. But been going 90 minutes now, almost 94 minutes. So I feel like we've basically touched on everything. Is there any last kind of comments or anything like that? I think I know what might be coming, but is there anything else you want to say before we kind of wrap this thing up?
Bear with me for a second. I just want to rattle this off real quick. Gervonta Davis, Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, Artur Beterbiev, Tyson Fury, Dimitri Bivol, Canelo Alvarez, Alexander Usyk, Noya Inoue, I know I'm butchering that. Terence Crawford, right? That's ESPN's pound for pound 1 through 10. I went backwards, 10 through 1.
Okay. For a second, I was well, hold on. I was like, I like the names. I don't know if I like that order, but okay, I see what you're saying.
The reason I'm rattling those off is at one point, all of those 10 fighters was either a club level fighter or below. Even the guys who didn't quite make the list, right? So the guys who were just on the outside, Errol Spence, Teofimo, Lomachenko, Jamel Charlo, Jaron Ennis, Boots Ennis. Those were all club level fighters. In Lomachenko's case, he was a Olympic fighter for years, which you still need a lot of support for, to be able to do that, because most people are just making promotional money. They're not taking money for their actual fights. So I say that to say, please continue to support your local fighters. Continue to support club fights. If you're out on vacation somewhere and there's a local fight you want to pick up, please go check them out, because if the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in the world were once those guys, right? Just imagine what could happen if you continuously support the guys that are doing it for next to nothing right now. So continue to support local fighters, no matter what city you live in, because as Terence Crawford can prove, you can be from a town where not a lot goes on and be the man. So
100%. Like I said, you and Felix go to club shows in Arizona. I've been to about 5 or 6 already this year. Kind of a downtime because all the guys who I'm close with have just fought, so they kind of have some time off, but they'll be kind of heating up later on this year. So we will have a lot of coverage. And we like to cover, we talk about all the big fights on here, but we use our other platforms, the YouTube platform, Instagram, the OnlyFans, the Facebook. We use those also to spread out. We do a lot of coverage on club shows and on some of those guys. So once they get up to these level, to that level, you guys already know who they are and stuff like that for sure. So one last comment we have in here from Belito Ramirez. What do you guys think of Edwin De Los Santos? I am really, really impressed with just the transformation Edwin De Los Santos has been able to make. William Foster, a guy who actually fought on Pro Box the other day, who I'm very, very high on also, he beat Edwin De Los Santos on Showbox in a split decision. De Los Santos kind of, I think, faded a bit later on in that fight. That was at 130. He's now at 135. The big thing for him is he knocked out Rayo. So that was the big thing that got him to this point as a legit contender. But I think people still had some question marks. The Joseph Adorno fight was the last fight he had. And that was a fight where I think a lot of people thought Adorno was going to do some good things in that fight. But De Los Santos showed that he's not just a power puncher, that he's a boxer. He's very educated. He's very smart with his mind, that he can think his way through a fight also. And that's what impressed me the most. Is I know Edwin De Los Santos can crack. I know that he's explosive. But the boxing and the IQ that he showed me in the Adorno fight really, really impressed me. And I'm excited. I know Frank Martin's going to fight Shakur, but I would have loved to see Edwin De Los Santos. I knew even Edwin De Los Santos, he's a guy people say no one wants to fight Shakur. Edwin De Los Santos has been on Instagram, Twitter, all these things calling out Shakur, saying he wants to fight the Frank Martin fight, Isaac Cruz fight. I think there were a lot of fights, even if in Tank Davis eventually. Like, I think there were a lot of guys that Edwin De Los Santos can fight at 135. And even if he doesn't beat those guys, I think he's shown now that he is at least warranted an opportunity like that. So what do you think on De Los Santos? Like, another one of these guys who wasn't a huge name a few years ago, was probably fighting on club shows here and there, and now we're talking about him and he's a legit contender at 135.
What I like about him is his response to the loss to Foster, right? Mm-hmm. And Foster, for his part, if I'm being 100%, I'm actually more impressed with De Los Santos' record since his loss to Foster than I am with Foster's record since his win over De Los Santos, right? I kind of feel like the level of opponent, has been better for him. I like that, he jumped right back into it. And he didn't take, some guy who was 3-56, in his next fight. He fought a guy who was another undefeated guy, 12-0. He's took 2 back-to-back 12-0 guys. And then, he fought a guy who was 17-2. So, he didn't go backwards. And I love to see that with a guy, you learn from what you lost. We were talking about it earlier, and you apply it to your wins. And I think that, hell, if him and Foster both continue to win, maybe they can run it back later on, when they both get a little bit more traction. But I think De Los Santos is a good kid. I think that, again, we'll be talking about him, if not winning, but contending for a ship.
Yeah, no, for sure. And even there's some other names. Like, I know that obviously he beat Ryo. So Edwin De Los Santos and Chris Colbert, that's a fight I'd like to see. Michelle Rivera. I don't know if he's coming back at 140. That's the fight I'd like to see. So 135, there's no short of names there too. So Edwin De Los Santos, I know he's kind of not been frozen out, but it's been harder for him to kind of get fights recently because he's at that point as a contender and things have kind of dried up a bit. But I do hope to see him back in the ring soon because the Adorno performance, I was very, very pleased with what he did. I was high on him before that, but I'm even higher now. So I really want to see. He's got a bright future ahead of him. So we shall see. And he's getting better each and every time out, which is a very, very scary thing. If you don't fight him now and you wait a few more fights, he's only 23 years old. He's not someone who's in his 30s or anything like that. He will continue to get better. So I promise some of these guys out there, not that they're listening, but if they are, if you want to fight someone like Edwin De Los Santos, I would get him now rather than let him get a few more fights under his belt because he keeps getting better and he could turn into a real problem real soon.
The biggest compliment, right, is when nobody wants to fight you. Mm-hmm. It sucks. You know what I mean? But that's the biggest compliment you can get is when it's, hey, look at the Winky Whites of the world, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody wanted to fight him. Mm-hmm. Why? Because he was, he was one of the better guys, right? He had to go overseas. I think it was for like 8 fucking years just to get fights. And some of these guys are doing that too. Like credit to a lot of these younger guys who are fighting each other nowadays, right? They're giving us those fights we want to see. The young, undefeated guys fighting each other. I think we're getting more and more of that, just like we saw with De Los Santos and Foster, right? So credit to them for actually having those fights so you guys don't have to go other places to get quality fights and build the records up before they can get a ship. So I love it, bro. I think that, I hope this trend continues. I hope these guys continue to fight other young, hungry lions and aren't taking easy street to a strap.
100%. And last thing I'll say is going back to the point I had before, people said, oh, Frank Martin, Edwin De Los Santos lost. Was he exposed? Is he a hype job? Is he never going to be the same now that he lost? No. In fact, he's even better than he was before. So let's all chill out on all these lost things. I know it's a cool thing to say for clips. This guy's a hype job. This guy's overrated. This guy was never that good. But all of your favorite fighters except Floyd Mayweather have lost and lost multiple times. So at the end of the day, you win some, you lose some, and he's a better fighter now because of it.
Every fighter but what? Floyd and
Andre Ward. Andre Ward's another one too.
And Andre Ward,
Finito Lopez, but that's on the high level. Only 3 guys.
We're talking about the Hall of Fame.
Joe Calzaghe even too. But so either way, you can count him on your hand at the end of the day.
The Hall of Fame is littered with guys who have 10 losses on their record, 10 or more losses on their record because they were fighting the best guys in the division. When you're fighting the best, you shouldn't be undefeated, to be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're fighting the best, you know what I mean? You can't be unless you're, like you said, Floyd or Andre Ward. Everybody has a bad night at the office, bro. Especially when you're fighting that level of guy. It's like that'd be like expecting LeBron to win every game he's ever played. You know what I'm saying? Or to expect that Tom Brady had to win every Super Bowl. It's unrealistic, bro. When you're playing against the best in the world, you're gonna take some L's, man.
No, 100%, exactly. So, shout out to all you guys in the chat. Another great episodes, Nibs. It's always a pleasure. So it's going to continue to be. The longer we do this, sky's the limit. It's only up from here. We already started with the good base, but it's only going to get better and better. So we'll be on the lookout. We'll let you guys know on our Instagram page at ITR Boxing what day. It's probably going to be a Thursday this next week, not a Friday episode. I know Friday has a top-ranked show, Joaquin Gonzalez against Luis Alberto Lopez. We may or may not have a special guest who's in a big fight coming up on Thursday. I still got to finalize some things with that. So be on the lookout. We'll let you guys know, though, and stay tuned. I think they might have a show Monday if they do get on Felix for what he owes Nibs at the end. And then I think that's it. So, Nibs, any last things you want to say on that before we wrap this up?
Catch and Counter, the authority in all things boxing. Fuck with us or get on.
Yes, sir. That might have to be a little clip or something right there. Y'all heard him right there. This is Catch and Counter. We're out of here. So, peace out, everyone. Salute to everyone tuning in.